All right, welcome back to another episode of Lost for Words with Toby and Lori.
Yeah.
It is, let's see, April 14th. It's a Wednesday. Happy Hump Day.
Is that what it is?
It's
Hump Day?
Hump Day, yeah!
Yeah!
How about that camel? So, what, yeah.
Well, our discussion today is going to be cancel culture?
Cancel culture. Oh boy, we're going to cover something a little controversial today, right?
Yeah, Lori kind of explained a little bit about this to me, and I'm like, that's a little new to me because, the world's changing every day. New things come out, and I'm like, to me, I'm kind of like old school, so is Lori, but to me, I'm like, what the fuck, do we have to name a titles or everything?
Right.
Now it's going to be your damn shoes. Now it's going to be your underwear. So
Aunt Jemima's syrup
yeah.
and Uncle Ben's rice and all that other stuff. But the climate's changing, right? So cancel culture. What is cancel culture? So cancel culture refers to the popular practice of withdrawing support for or canceling public figures and companies and things like that after they've done or said something that's considered objectionable or offensive, right?
Right.
Cancel culture is generally discussed as being performed on social media or something of that sort in the form of like group shaming. Now, how does that affect us in the metal scene, right? I mentioned Uncle Ben's and Aunt Jemima Rice because of, the air of racism and what's going on there. You remember when Colin Kaepernick kneeled in the NFL and all of a sudden everybody was up in arms about Nike shoes and that kind of thing. So what does that mean for us as metalheads? And that's kind of what we're going to cover today. Politics, right? Nobody wants to fucking talk about politics. Politics is one of those slippery slope conversations that draws lines in the sand and pisses everybody off. Now, Toby and I had a great discussion this morning over coffee about the PMRC. You guys remember the 80s and all of this, Dee Snider going in and talking to the Senate committee about, the
censorship,
the dirty dozen and censorship and all of that, and the line in the sand that drew. Politics is politics, and people are going to be on one side or the other, and we don't all agree. We're never going to agree.
Never. I don't care if you're right or left. You're just never going to agree. But there's a time where you can come together as human beings and discuss on each side what you like to see change and would like to see agree on something.
Right.
In the middle. It's like cutting it down the middle. Say, okay, I can agree to disagree, or without sitting there and dogging each other because you're an asshole or you're a jerk.
Right. Well, and we talked about this morning too, is metal in general has always been kind of anti-establishment. We've always been like, fuck the man, and we're gonna do what we want, and anti-establishment, and really metalheads have been, and our bands and people in metal music have written things that have been political, right?
Right.
A lot of bands do it. A lot of bands have done it. And it's never been, we can't like this band because they're political. I mean, Megadeth is a very political band.
Very
and
much so.
Lots of bands write things about politics depending on what part of the world they're from, or even in our country. Sepultura being a good example of that, wrote about the politics and what was going on in Brazil. And I guess you could even say some of the anti-establishment kind of metal bands over in Europe, anti-religious. I mean, that kind of air. So when we're talking about cancel culture and we're talking about politics, or we'll start with politics and we'll talk about what happened with Iced Earth, for example, and John Schaefer and going and storming the Capitol. And, okay, so whether you agree with it or not, right, Toby and I had the discussion that, everybody on both sides, and my news feed and your news feed and everybody's news feed was filled with, I support this, I don't support this, fuck this guy, fuck that guy, whatever, wherever you stood on that, right? And people were like, well, there goes my collection, I'm going to burn my records, and I'm never going to listen to Iced Earth again. How do you feel about that? And that's when we're talking about cancel culture in metal music, right?
Right.
And how you feel about that. I don't know. My feelings, my thought on that being, so everybody knew how he was. Everybody knew where he stood. We knew he was a patriot years ago, right? Does that take away from the fact that any given band was great in their time, or did great things, or had contributions to our scene, right?
Right.
And does that mean that I can no longer state that Alive in Athens is still one of the best live albums ever? Or that The Glorious Burden is still an album that gives me goosebumps, and I love the message that it served at its time, just because one person has a belief system and does something that I may or may not agree with.
I agree.
You know, I mean, how do you feel about it?
Well, as far as me, it's with any band who does any kind of metal, any kind of band that does any kind of music. If you believe in that such thing, that's okay. If you believe in you have rights for this and that and the other, which I don't believe nobody really in generalized that you don't have any rights. Not anymore. But as far as this is concerned, I see it as if you're going to do something like the thing that John Schaefer did, then you need to be accountable for something like that, because I believe that was outrageous, in my personal opinion. I think they could have did it a different way.
You're talking about the mass, the people who did what they did at the Capitol here in America.
Yeah, just at the Capitol.
Sure.
That's not the way to do things.
That's your opinion.
And that is my opinion. Now, does he need to go to jail and serve time? Well, in my opinion, yes. Because if I did that, I would definitely be in jail.
Sure.
But do I hate Ice Earth? No. And I don't hold the whole band accountable.
Right.
For something like that. And you shouldn't do that to anybody and say, well, I'm just not going to buy their fucking records anymore because the lead singer or the guitarist or the drummist has some kind of issue.
Right. Well, okay, so off of the Iced Earth thing, let's talk about Manowar. Okay. One of my top 3 all-time favorite bands. And what happens? Their guitarist ends up being charged with a pedophilia kind of thing.
Right.
Does that mean that I can't love Manowar ever again? No. It means that this person who did this crime gets his day in court and whatever, right? The band distanced themselves from them. They still go and do their thing. They replace their guitarist and they move on, right? So again, we talk about cancel culture and what that does for metalheads. And, your news feed can do the same thing. It blows up and fuck this band, fuck that band, whatever. Same difference. What we were talking about earlier is, it draws lines in the sand and divides our culture of metal people, and it creates division within our group where there really shouldn't be any. We should all be saying, well, my personal opinion is, with anything, with actions, with your personal actions comes responsibility. Personally, socially, legally, everything you do. And I used the example with Toby this morning. If you go knock off the liquor store, does that mean that our radio station that we air our radio show on all automatically gets canceled, and that everybody should just assume that Metal Messiah Radio condones Toby knocking off a liquor store? Of course not. That's ridiculous.
Exactly.
So that was kind of my point of, why would you hold an entire band's 20-year, 30-year, 40-year catalog responsible because their guitarist likes, child porn, or because they have a patriot who stormed the castle? You know what I mean? So, we're curious about other people's thoughts on that. And, we talked about the masking thing and how that in effect is the same thing as far as cancel culture goes. We have people on both sides of that. How the pandemic has affected our culture we can't go to live shows and people are sick, and there are people on both sides of that. Oh, the pandemic is fake and it's just fucking up our whole thing. We can't tour, we're not making money. And then there are people who are saying, listen, people are dying and you need to be a good human and protect everybody. And, everybody has a right to how they feel. I think the point is we don't have a right to go on social media and start shaming everybody for their belief system. There's a fine line to walk when it comes to being compassionate, thinking about, your opinion matters, and so do other people's, and agreeing to disagree on certain things. And that is a slippery slope to walk with a lot of things. I mean, yeah, garbage humans are garbage humans, and if you're going to exploit women for sex trafficking, and if you're going to be a racist, then granted, yeah, I don't want to have anything to do with you, and that is my choice. You don't want to promote that kind of stuff.
No, I sure do.
In our scene either, but I do have a choice to not play that kind of music on my program, and we do our due diligence for that. It's not like we cater to mainstream bands anyway.
Correct.
But what was case in point? There was a band in Brazil. Do you remember?
Yes.
And,
I know what you're going to talk about.
Right. And
about them, one of the members, and we're not on a name drop, but one of the members had got drunk one night and was partying. Now remember, getting drunk and partying, you don't know what you're fucking doing when that happens. In most cases. So he jumped over a tombstone. So he got in trouble for it. So automatically,
the record label dropped them.
The record label dropped him. They judged him for something they probably did in their youth.
Right, but again, with actions comes responsibility, personally, socially, and legally. So this guy probably got into some trouble, probably paid a fine, probably did his thing. And now his whole band and everything else is going to pay the consequences for that. Is it right? Maybe not. Is the guy being held responsible for it? Absolutely.
Right.
But a lot of people would go kind of... Is it the same as possessing child porn? It's apples to oranges. You can't compare the two, right? But by the same token, did their whole band deserve to suffer for that? Probably not.
Probably not.
So but is it okay to go on social media and shame the whole band or call them all assholes because in their culture, desecrating, a grave or whether it was accidental or intentional is probably not the best thing either.
No.
But by the same token, you don't cancel the whole thing just because of a mistake. And I guess that's kind of where you talk about drawing the line in the sand.
I think the reality of this whole situation with cancel culture is to realize that, hey, there are people out there that are real douchebags.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the people that are people. They want to know you. They're real kind. Then you have the guys on the other side, the people on the other side that are just total assholes. So you either ignore them and stay away from them, or you try to have a meeting place in the middle.
Right. And we're a big metal family. We all have that commonality where metal is what we believe. It's part of our religion. It's part of our culture. And we all want to be happy in that. And, we had an experience this week where somebody in our metal community who I have respected for many, many years, who was very political, and I've stayed away from that, got kind of rude and abrasive and bully about something political for really no good reason. And it's a very fine line to walk. And you just have to say, listen, I'm done, and I don't need that part. Does it mean I'm not going to support their musical endeavors? Absolutely not, because I'm that's not my way. But don't be an asshole. Don't let your politics get the best of you, and let's stay on our common ground as metalheads. And be part of our big metal family and love each other and take care of each other and support what we do. And if you can't talk about religion and you can't talk about politics and keep it civil and agree to disagree on certain things, then don't. And don't talk about them, and don't let them divide us the way that they're dividing the rest of the world on these subjects, politics, religion, race, and all those things. Because we are, as metalheads, a big melting pot of goodness. You know what I mean?
Right.
Our music shouldn't be allowed to have those dividing points. At least in my opinion, they shouldn't. Because I don't want to see our culture implode.
No, we don't. Just everybody's got to realize, like I said, everybody has a quirks, in their, I guess their, I don't know, I just lost my memory, I'm sorry.
You lost your train of thought on that?
But everybody's different.
We are.
And that's okay.
And it brings a really good point too, that, people are allowed to evolve and change. There are a lot of things that the last year has taught a lot of us about the way that we treat other people, and about the way that we portray ourselves, or about the things that we need to learn to better ourselves, or the way that we need to interact with people. I mean, we're all learning, we're all changing. At what point are we allowed to accept our responsibilities for who we are as people, and atone for those things, and be allowed to grow and change and be better people? I mean, I'm not the same person I was 30 years ago,
Right.
and I'm allowed to make mistakes and say, you know what, I'm a good person now, or I'm better at this now, or I've learned from these things now. And it's okay. It's okay to say that I was a young, naive, or made mistakes. And I'm not doing those things now, and I'm a good person. And what do they say? It's about intent. Everything is about intent. I'm not intending to go out and be a douchebag, just because you think differently than I do, or we're on different sides of the political or religious standpoint. You know what I mean? When we talk about religion, per se, is that, I say, oh, I'm a heathen and I don't believe in your Christianity or whatever, but I'm not out there purposely denouncing anybody who is. And personally, I love a lot of music that has that undertone, and I support it, and I'll play it regardless of the fact that it may not be something that I practice. And does that mean I'm going to go out and publicly shame it and say, well, I'm going to play that because it's Christian? Hell no. It's just as good regardless. And I could say the same thing for something that's political, or something that, might be, like, for instance, just to throw out there, like a band, or music that might be considered explicitly anti-feminist or sexualizing women,
Right.
because I'm a woman.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's done with its intent that it's humorous, like the Metal MILF, or
Yeah.
anything like that.
Right.
Oh, okay, that's offensive. It wasn't intended to be offensive. It was intended to be
joke.
funny.
Yeah.
And who doesn't need a little bit of laughter?
Oh my
Now,
God.
if they came out there, like a lot of people say, oh, Steel Panther,
They're still doing it as a joke.
they're doing it to be funny.
Yeah.
Do I particularly care for that kind of humor? No, I don't.
Of course not. I mean,
But that doesn't mean that they suck, or that doesn't mean that they don't have merit in what they do. And hell, they're popular. They sell tickets. They
Hell
tour. They
yeah.
do their thing, right?
Yeah.
So, does that mean that I'm going to jump on the feminist bandwagon and start picketing their concerts because they need to be canceled because they're offensive? No. It just draws lines in the sand. And I think we just, as a culture, need a lot less of that. That's just my opinion. Tell us what you think. Tell us if you guys agree with that.
Yeah, do that. I mean, we'd like to hear from you guys on this, and see what your thoughts are. I mean, I have my own opinions, and I don't usually share a lot of them because I don't want everybody getting butt hurt and start a big argument, because I'm too old for that shit, and I don't need that stress. So I keep a lot of stuff to myself these days. I used to get into big arguments and tell them to go fuck themselves usually, but today I just said it's not even worth the time. So with that, I'm saying, so you remember that with every action comes responsibility, comes with responsibility. So just remember, in everything you do, your actions comes responsibility. So that's all I got to say about that.
You said Forrest Gump.
Yeah.
So we hope you guys enjoyed our little conversation about cancel culture. Tell us what you think. Tell us what you think in the comments. Give us some feedback. Let us know if you like our podcast. If you do, we'll keep them up. We'll probably do keep them up anyway, just because we like to hear ourselves talk.
And we usually don't get to do this on our radio station, so we thought we'd do this.
So until next time, you guys, it's Toby and Lori. Have a great day.